February 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Parks Advisory Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety due to the COVID-19 virus and to comply with orders issued by the Governor, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and Washtenaw County Health Department. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call toll-free 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 949-7173-0458. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Colin, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Apple, Commissioner Borgsdorf. Here. Commissioner Kraut, Commissioner London.
Here.
Commissioner Marson.
Here.
Commissioner Morrison.
Here.
Commissioner Ramaswamy.
She was
Commissioner
here.
Skilas.
Here.
And Commissioner Smith.
Here.
And you have Councilmember Hayner and Grand in attendance. You have a quorum.
Great, thanks, Colin. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. It was sent to you ahead of time. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our first public comment period. Callers are welcome to speak for 3 minutes. Kristen, do we have anyone on the phone?
No callers.
No callers. Okay. Thank you. Item 5, approval of the minutes from our January 26th, 2021 PAC meeting. Those were also included in your packet. Are there any additions or corrections or a motion to approve the minutes from January?
I motion to approve.
Motion by Rachel.
Second.
Second by Stephen. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the January 26th, 2021 PAC meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. Minutes are approved. Moving on to presentations. We have 2 presentations today. First, I'd like to welcome Josh Landefeld to present to us about the 2021 outdoor pools and day camps.
Hello, everybody. Good to see everyone virtually and to be able to talk about something exciting. With me and presenting along with me will be Gail Hearn, Bill Meeks, Sarah Stewart, and Cheryl Somm. As we all know, COVID impacted what we were able to do last summer. And unfortunately, it will most likely impact us again what we do in 2021. So we're here to talk about what we have planned for pools and camps this year. The decisions made last year and the planning for this year were all designed to mitigate risk for our staff and users by working closely with the regulatory groups as we evaluate the changing orders. And that will continue to happen this year. But as of today, we have a plan that we're going to kind of talk to you about and hopefully get some feedback from you as well. We're going to start with Gail as she's going to talk about what we were able to do last year at Fuller. Oh, and I got to show the screen, sorry. Let's see. Share. Sorry, technology is never easy for me.
You got it.
Okay, so you just want me to head off, Josh. So last year, Fuller Pool opened. My name is Gail Hearn. I run Fuller and Mac Pools for the city. And last summer, Sarah Stewart and myself ran Fuller Pool. We opened to the public based on reservations only. We were only allowed 1 person per lap lane per the county's regulations. And that's really because of the 6 feet distancing without a mask, right? You can't really have two people in a lane and still distance by 6 feet. We also had specific spaces for family groups. And so those spaces were during certain times of the day that were more ideal for families. They were in the deep end as well as in the shallow end, and then some of the lap lane space. And all reservations were about 90 minutes long. We really did not have public spaces that were used by everybody. So for instance, our shower rooms were not open. We had bathrooms and showers available for emergent use, but we asked swimmers to arrive at the pool with their swimsuits on, ready to swim, and with all of their own equipment. So there was no equipment sharing. And reservations were made via online or over the phone, depending on sort of your personal situation with technology and access to the internet. And after each 90-minute session, we cleaned down all the touch points for all of our customers, as well as the bathrooms, as well as all of our guard equipment. So that was a process that we went through. We were really pleased that we had no positive cases that resulted from attendance at Fuller this summer, and that was by both staff and customers. That was something that we were really proud of. You can see we had a lot of guests, actually, even though we had a limited number of spaces throughout the summer. And we were really pleased to have most of our spaces filled pretty regularly through the entire time that we were open. And we were open from July 1st to September 20th. So some of the things, good, bad, that we took away from the summer experience was that our reservation system that we used really was not built for this type of experience. So we sort of turned a car into a boat and then tried to put it in the water, and it didn't really work that well. So we knew that we had to make some changes to that system. We also needed to find a way to limit the number of uses per individual. We encouraged people to limit their uses, especially for the lap lanes, to 3 per week, but there was no actual way for us to do that with the infrastructure that we were working with for reservations. And then obviously, with the limited number of spaces throughout the facility, we wanted to figure out how can we really maximize the use of the space. And so one of the things you'll see in our proposal is the inclusion of bungee swimming spots. So where we attach a bungee to the side of the pool, the patron or guest wears the bungee around their waist, and then they swim. And it's like swimming on a treadmill, only you're in a pool. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is offering different workouts online that will help people introduce themselves to bungee swimming, so because it'll be new to a lot of people, but it will offer a significant number of spaces more than what we had last year. And then we also needed to figure out a way to get more younger swimmers in the pool. So because we could do deep end tests, obviously with distancing and the maximum use of our spaces last year, we really were thinking about how can we allow younger swimmers to swim, but do it in a safe way. And so we are, obviously you'll see later, we're going to propose some things to address that. And then just being more proactive for scholarship families. We found that because of the nature of the reservation system and the challenge in folks getting spaces, that our scholarship families missed out a little bit. And not just with swimming, but with obviously not having a camp experience as well. Josh, do you want to take this part?
Well, one of the things, and last summer, I mean, the job that Gail and Sarah and her staff did was obviously recognized by some of the customer feedback that was provided at the end of the summer and throughout the summer. And it really was a bright spot in 2020 for being able to get open and to have the protocols in place. And again, a lot of this feedback also helped us kind of as we thought about how we do things moving forward, because we have a standard that we know that we can do. And so as we think about other pools or other programs, we want to make sure that we kind of have that same set of feedback at the end of this summer as well. So we'll go through, I won't embarrass Gail and Sarah for all the wonderful things that were said about them. They did an awesome job last year, and this is something.
The only thing I do want to say, Josh, is that our seasonal staff are phenomenal. They worked so hard last summer. Our cashiers, I mean, they endured a lot of challenging conversations and some uncomfortable confrontations with customers, and they were so phenomenal. And I really think they were the highlight of the summer. Our staff was really just out of this world. Do you want to
Still
take
you,
it?
Gail. Still you,
Okay.
Gail.
All right. So as we're looking forward to 2021, obviously we're still working with the state and the county and local agencies to figure out what makes the most sense. The county is still letting us know that we really are only going to be allowed one person per lane until there is a significant amount of vaccination that happens. And obviously some things are going to have to change regarding the pandemic. So that's something that we are keeping in mind as we plan for 2021. We really looked at what are the options that we have, the rules and policies that we have that we can maybe alter or change a little bit to increase opportunities for people. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, our younger swimmers really were challenged last summer to find a space specifically to work out, right? These are kids that are on swim teams or like to lap swim. So we have looked around the country at what is sort of the standard, and then also looked at our own policies. So regarding the deep end test, you know, we looked at our policy of letting kids come to the pool without an adult at 12 years old. So we sort of went based on that, and then also what is kind of an industry standard. And we are looking to lower the age of our deep end test. You have to be 16 years or older in order to not take the deep end test. Now the policy will be you have to be 12 years older to not take the deep end test. And what that will do, because we require the deep end test for lap swimming, that will open up those lap lanes for kids that are 12 and older now. And also our deep end spaces for kids that are 12 and older. And obviously, you know, we are going to make sure that we're communicating with them that if we feel there are safety issues, that we will address those by case. But we feel pretty confident that those folks that will be looking for those spaces will be sending swimmers that are confident and comfortable in those situations. And then obviously we are really trying to look at expanding our pool hours. So for instance, we will have people in the pool from 6 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. at Fuller this summer, and then also extended hours at Vets and Buhr based on what they have going on with programming. And the other sort of really fun thing, and people have been asking for this for years and years, is the question always comes up, can we open Fuller earlier? Can we keep Fuller open later? So as most of you may know, for the last few years, we have kept Fuller open into September, usually it's the first 2 weeks of September. So that will continue, but we are also looking to open Fuller early. So May 15th is our target, and that will give an additional, so if you think about our traditional summer, this gives us an additional month of swimming outdoors for folks to increase opportunities. So that's really exciting as well. And then obviously one of the things that is most challenging is actually staffing all of these facilities, right? And lifeguarding is a very skilled position, even though we think of lifeguarding as like that fun thing that kids do. It is a very skilled position. So it requires us to make sure that we are hiring lifeguards that are qualified and certified. And so we do reimburse for new lifeguard certifications, making sure that we are recruiting in classes that are already going, and really reaching out to the community, to our swimming community, to try to get kids that feel comfortable working in this environment to come out and do that. And so it's a challenge because certifying new lifeguards, typically you're in very close contact, so that's a challenge, but there are some places that are trying some stuff out. And so we're hoping that we are able to recruit enough lifeguards and staff for the summer. So one of, I think, the most exciting thing are our new UV filters. I run Mac Indoor Pool, and several years ago, there was a crypto outbreak in Ann Arbor, and a lot of pools were closed. But luckily, Mac had just had our UV filter in about 2 months before that. And so we actually escaped the terrors of the crypto outbreak and were able to continue having guests swim in our pool. And so this year, we are really excited that all 3 of the outdoor pools will have a UV filter as a secondary filtration system. This kills everything, all waterborne diseases and illnesses. It will make the water quality much better. And in an environment where COVID is a thing, it's just one more step to show the public that we really care about their safety and their health. And so that is very, very exciting. And then to address the issues that we had with our reservation system, we looked around trying to find a system that we could use even temporarily. And we have found a system that is easy for customers to use. It will allow us to limit lap swim reservations to 3 per week. That means we'll be able to have the reservation system open all summer long and not have to roll out day by day by day reservations, which is very exciting. And it will allow folks that had more challenges with technology and just getting in to have access to the pool. And then the other part of it is that it will allow us to sort of keep families together on our system and have them reserve spaces within one account, which was a challenge that we had last summer. So that's really exciting, and that will be very helpful for swimmers to get access to.
On the other side of last year is unfortunately we were not able to run any day camps. The decision by the state to allow day camps came very late. And once that was allowed, we, based on how our camps normally ran into some major challenges. It really wouldn't allow us to run those camps based on the licensing guidelines that our camps run by. The two big ones were limiting non-essential interactions between campers and the public. Fuller Pool, Buhr Park Pool, and the liveries are very public places. And during that time, we wanted to get those operations up and running and provide that opportunity. But in doing that, we really couldn't separate campers from the general public. The other thing that was really kind of prevalent in the requirements was the indoor spacing requirement for inclement weather. It is always there, but normally thunderstorms come around and people get packed into a smaller space. But when you're trying to social distance 6 feet from everybody else, it's a little bit harder with those spaces. And the liveries and Fuller Pool, especially because it was open, just don't have a lot of indoor space that they can do. And based on our understanding of indoor spaces a year ago, we really couldn't do anything to do that. So those are really the limitations on why we didn't last year. Since that point, since Labor Day of last year, we've really been figuring out what kind of things can we do for 2021, because we had plans throughout last spring, but we really wanted to take the time to figure out what we could this year. Staff have been on frequent calls with the state of Michigan licensing, with American Camping Association, as well as other parks organizations, to figure out what has worked, what was done in 2020 that was successful, and also what was less successful, and evaluate it there. About a month ago, we had a call with the head of camping for FLARA, the licensing agency for the state, and we spoke specifically about our camps and got the feedback from him in regards to what things worked, what things did they understand needed to be kind of adjusted, and how the rules were implied for some of those concerns that we had with general interactions between public and camp, the indoor spacing, what that meant now. And that conversation, I think we all left very positively about what we could do and what we couldn't do this summer, and really kind of impacted the plan that we had moving forward. And as Gail mentioned with the swimming, the other thing that we realized and we wanted to make sure is that we dedicated an amount of spots towards our scholarship families. In the past, because there's a mad rush on February 1st to get into whatever camps are there, sometimes we have families that miss out because they're not technologically advanced, don't have the resources. And so we have, as a group, decided to set aside 10% of our camps because we're not tied to a dollar amount raised. We can make this as part of our business being done because it's the right thing to do. And oftentimes those in the most need are the ones that can't get in as early as they'd like. So we're really excited about the plan that we have coming for camp and what we're able to do. So now we'll get into the specifics of the individual facilities. Go from there.
Okay, well, hopefully you're not tired of hearing my voice. Okay, so obviously for Fuller, we're going to continue with our reservation system. And like I mentioned, we are adding these bungee swimming spaces to increase our capacity. And we will be having on our website some videos so people can see those, as well as, like I mentioned, some specific workouts for beginner, intermediate, and advanced swimmers. And some very specific workouts that I think will make it possible. The other thing that's nice about these bungee spots is there are actually a lot of people who do water running. And actually, it's a very popular way to get your water run in to be tethered to the wall. So that's excellent. We will have 10 time slots throughout the day. And I do want to say one thing about the 90-minute time. So I know that there have been some conversations about making that time smaller, maybe 60 minutes. And one of the things that we found was that if we give swimmers 90 minutes, there is no mad rush to get in, and there's no mad rush to get your swim done. And then this feverish get out of the pool, fight with them so we can get the next group in. And that really helps with cleaning, but also patron safety and their own stress level. The other part of that is that families really need 90 minutes. I mean, once you get your kids loaded into the car and you've spent 45 minutes with sunscreen and crying and, oh my gosh, you need 90 minutes, please, for at least, because you're probably going to really get 30 of actual swimming. So those are some of the factors that we take into account when we're making some of these decisions. Obviously, we're going to be open 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 9:30, as I mentioned. It gives lots of opportunities for families. And as you'll see on the next slide, this is one of the reasons why we are unable to host camp this summer. So, it is a push and pull of how much public we have in our facility, our ability to separate camp from the public. If you've ever been to Fuller, our camp is very much integrated into our entire facility. And so that separation is really hard to achieve. And, when we talked to the official from Lara, he really made it clear that that was something that he did not feel comfortable with. So for that reason, we are not going to have camp at Fuller this summer, which is a huge bummer, but we're going to obviously look forward to 2022 to make it awesome. So.
All right, next up will be Sarah Stewart.
Hi, I'm Sarah Stewart, and I've prepared some information about what we will be planning for Buhr for 2021. So first of all, we are looking forward to hosting camp this year. We're having our one pool camp instead of it being at Fuller and Buhr. It will just be at Buhr this summer. We plan to use the pool until 2:30 p.m. just for camp only. And what is nice about having camp only and then only at this facility is that we will be able to increase our capacity from 50 campers to 70 campers. Throughout the COVID, we've learned that the MDHHS has a definition of indoor and outdoor, and our ice rink here is considered indoors. So this is great for camp because we have a huge indoor space for campers for inclement weather that will allow everybody to stay socially distanced in the event of inclement weather. We are in the process of requesting that capacity increase from the state. And we plan to have our hours of operation be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. which gives a little extra time this year than there has been in the past, just to help parents, drop off and pick up their children within the hour before. So 8 to 9 will be drop off, and then pickup is 4 to 5. So it spreads parents out a little bit, so we don't have a line waiting to drop off and to pick up. So that's the thought process behind the hours. And then this will allow us to have a total potential campers of 840 for the summer. So for the pool and camp, as mentioned before, our biggest obstacle is having camp also in a facility that is open to the public. So general swim will be outside of camp hours for the most part. We will be having some lap swim time that will overlap with camp, but it'll be a very small number of the public being in the facility at the same time as the camp. So there will be very little room for crossing paths there. So we plan to run the pool in the same model that Fuller had last summer, with a couple changes just because our pools are different. But we will do reservation only using the same updated software that we are implementing. There will be public swim Monday through Friday from 2:30 to 8:30 p.m. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, we will be open all day to the public from 10 a.m. to 8:30. For the pool, we will have, throughout the day, we will have between 3 to 6 lap lanes available for reservation. We will have between 3 and 6 bungee spots, and then between 5 and 7 family spaces available to rent as well, or reserve, not rent. So that leaves us a total of 40 slots on the weekdays. 21 of those are family slots, which will be 6 people per space. And then on the weekends, that is a total of 70 spaces available.
Thanks, Sarah. One of the things, I mean, for those of you who haven't been to Buhr, I mean, one of the nice things there is that where camp runs is really separate from the pool facility. To some extent, we can almost gate them away. There's gates that lock up the area. We won't lock them in the cage, but we will kind of keep them in the rink, and it is truly separated from the pool users. So there really will be no interaction, and even looking at porta potties and other things so that bathrooms are shared as well. Next up, we will hear from Bill Meeks about vets.
Hello, everyone. Our plan for vets is to do a combination of swim lessons and swim team and general swim along the same lines as Fuller's done the last summer. Vets has a very strong history with swim lessons and swim team participants. We had almost 400 registrants last year, or two summers ago. So we really want to try to provide something, since the other pools can't run lessons, and maybe even offer something, a virtual or a swim team competition where swimmers are competing from their time in the pool against other swimmers during their time. So bring that competition back a little bit that the swim team participants really like to do. So we're going to do the lessons in the morning from 9 a.m. to 12:30. We'd have about 11 spots in the pool. Use everything from the main pool, the tot splash for the little ones, the lap lanes for the swim team, and the deep end for some of the higher end swimmers. And start out with about 8 time slots during the morning, and just kind of see how they run back to back. And then switching over in the afternoon to the general swim time. Again, running with the reservation system that we're proposing. And we'd have about 12 areas spread out, again, in the main pool, tot splash, lap lanes available, and then the deep end from 12:30 to 8. So we'd have 60 slots available per day, and 40 family spots up to the 6 family members. So I think it provides a well-rounded use of the pool. It's not as big as Fuller to allow some of the things that they do, but it I think provides some things that the other two pools can't with the swim lessons. And although both have had strong swim lesson numbers as well, I think we can pull from them to get those people in the pool and give them something they haven't had in a while.
Thanks, Bill. Next up will be Cheryl speaking about river camps. Cheryl, I think you're muted. There you go.
I know, I'm trying to get it off. There we go, I got it. Yeah, my mouse isn't working well. So the Argo and Gallup camp are just slightly altered. The Gallup camp is for the younger children, the 2nd through 5th graders. And instead of 30 children, we're gonna go down to 20 due to the lack of indoor space. We'll have to be putting up tents at both Argo and Gallup to try to accommodate the children on inclement weather. So Gallup will be slightly less. We'll be able to keep the kids separate from the public by designating like a dock space. Like this dock will just be for camp as the children get launched to and from the boats out on the river. And then Argo camp, we can run with the 20 children and do the same hours. We're outdoors at Argo and Gallup anyways, and we'll have the inclement weathers, tents, pavilions. We can use the Gallup pavilion and the Argo pavilions as well. We are going to keep groups of 10 is what the state is requiring with 2 staff. So we'll have our little pod of 10 children doing the different activities. We'll have the children dropped off at Argo, for example, if they're going to do the Argo to Gallup River trip instead of us transporting the Gallup children. So just some, little tweaks and changes there as well. And then total potential campers is 440 for the summer. We really look forward to having the camps again. It brings a lot of energy and fun to the liveries to have all those kids out on the river.
Sure. And one of the things that we spoke to the head of Lara about is that even the deliveries are a public space. And one of the big differences is by all of the people that are there, we can require masks. One of the big differences between deliveries and in the pools is that in the water, masks are not allowed. And so that and when there is that passing interaction between public and camp, the fact that they're masked at deliveries makes for a big difference in how they review it. So that's one of the reasons we feel comfortable kind of moving forward with delivery camps. Unfortunately, you're going to hear from me for a couple slides, which is less exciting than those other ones, but wanted to take an opportunity to talk about just the differences between 2020 and 2021. Obviously, it's pretty simple. We had 1 pool open last year. We're looking to have 3 pools open this year. The reason we're kind of looking at the 3 is to provide the different opportunities that we talked about. Obviously, Fuller brings the 50-meter pool as well as kind of the general swim. By having the camp open at Buhr, it gives that opportunity. And then swim lessons at Vets is kind of touching on programs that we didn't get to deal with last year. Last year, because Fuller was only one open, we only had about 64 slots available per day. We're going to have over 150 per day available for lap swimming or a version of that in 2021. Family swim is another one where we're just getting more people out and hopefully utilizing it, going from 60 last year at Fuller only to over 115. And I use over because weekends are a little bit different than weekdays on a different type of thing. So, we're really excited to be able to offer those. Again, campers, I think all of us that work with camps love to see kids running around and doing to make our life a little bit more enjoyable. And so to go from 0 last year to a potential of 110 campers per week, we're really excited about being able to offer that. And swim lessons is going to be a very interesting one. We have about 44 plate slots that we can fill per day during weekdays. That'll rely a lot on staff and people's interest in doing it. But being able to get that out and do that is something that we want to be able to help kids feel safe in the water this summer now that we can get back and do that. So next steps, obviously staffing is going to be a major concern. Normally we return about 50% of our staff from year to year. For Buhr and Vets, we had a year off. We're not quite sure how many people are going to come back from 2 years ago. So it may be a little bit more challenging, but we're working on that to get that figured out. Certification is going to be more difficult. CPR classes are going to be smaller. Lifeguard is going to be really challenging. There are ways to do it that we're not necessarily comfortable, but we want to make sure that our people that are lifeguard certified know what they need to do and are safe. As we look at facilities, As Sarah mentioned, we're going to have a camp capacity meeting here in March. Our goal is hopefully that we'll get to that 20% increase. And then the UV filters and the normal opening prep obviously is stuff that we would be doing now, but it's just a little bit more as we prepare with COVID restrictions and concerns with that. And anyone who was at Fuller last year saw the wonderful paintings and the different designated spaces, as opposed to a big circle with an X in it that I would have planned. Gail did a great job of making it more fun and exciting for the families. So as we look at Buhr and vets, making sure that those places are as attractive as others. And as we've talked about at different times throughout this, making sure that we talk with our scholarship families and the community to let them know what we're looking to do and how to get engaged and involved, because just because we put it out there and say we want to do it, we have to do more than just put it at local spots. So our tentative timelines, we're talking to you guys today to get feedback, let you know what we're thinking. There's been lots of meetings between the people at the staff, but you guys always bring a lot of good questions and ideas, and we want to get that feedback from you guys. Our hope is that we can communicate out a plan beginning of next week, and then allow a little bit of time until March 15th to start registration. We want to make sure that people are aware of when that is. So we typically have a mad rush to get spots, and we want to give people that opportunity to do that. As normal, April and through May, we'll be hiring and prepping facilities and planning and working with safety to make sure that all of our plans are consistent with the orders and what we need to do to move forward. And then May, our goal is obviously to open pools. Typically it's Memorial Day weekend. If we can get Fuller up and running and it's the right staff, we can do that earlier. And orders are available to allow us to do that. And then camps would be scheduled to start in June 13th, after school is done and for AAPS. And hopefully that will all work through and we'll be able to have a great summer with that. So that's our presentation. Thank you for enduring my talk and all the other wonderful talk by the supervisors. And please let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Josh and everyone. Who has questions? I see Pravina's hand.
Thanks so much, Josh. This is amazing. And the whole team, I know this last year was a challenge and you guys did an amazing job. And I'm glad that you had time to reflect and think about how to move forward for this year. My question is, this is based on information now that Laura is giving you. Is there some thought if the government orders change, what would happen, say mid-season, if they said, you could have more people or you can have more people to lanes? Are you prepared for that shift? And then the second part of my question is, Laura versus the governor, is there any thought of what those two different entities are thinking? Thanks.
So when we met with Laura, and their expectation is that they don't see a lot of movement in a more positive way before the summer. And the reality is if something comes prior to the summer, we can evaluate it at that point, but we really don't foresee, and Laura doesn't foresee improvements by Laura or the government towards camp. Towards pools, it's a little bit different. That's a little bit easier, because I won't say easier because Gail will yell at me to say that it's easier, but with camp, obviously we have 40 hours of training that we have to have for all of our staff members, our counselors and stuff. And so we will be hiring with a number of people that we can utilize as we put out there. As throughout all of this pandemic, as orders come about, we've looked to see what we can do to adjust to those, to increase if possible. Sometimes that is not as immediate as the governor's orders. Sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to move into a direction to increase, but we are constantly evaluating what options we have and how we can do it with the staff that we have hired and available.
Can I just mention regarding the lane usage, the county, our county, probably more than most of the other counties in Southeast Michigan, is pretty strict about their recommendations regarding specifically pool space usage. Obviously, I would be surprised if that changes, but if it does, it would be pretty easy for us to implement additional folks in the lane. We would probably still do it by reservation because I think that that works in this environment, just to make sure that people are still being thoughtful about their interaction with other public. But I think that that's a combination that we could make, but I would be shocked if that were to happen.
One of the things that I would just add in is last year, everything happened so quickly. There would be an order from the governor at the end of the week, and it would say you were allowed to do something in 2 days. And I think what we did last year was we waited until we were ready and prepared to provide something that we felt was going to work, was going to be safe for staff and the public. So I would expect us to respond in the same way this season. If restrictions are loosened, then how do we implement those specifically at our facilities to make sure that we're still continuing to operate safely?
I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you so much. Last summer, I went to Fuller a couple times and it was just nice to have something kind of normal. So thank you so much for putting this together. Personally, I love the bungee idea because I love swimming, but I'm also very slow and people get very unhappy with me when they're like behind me. And so it makes me very nervous. So I think that's so incredible. Thank you so much. I can't wait for this to open.
I just wanted to say, I think it's really important that we're offering or reserving 10% of these spaces for scholarship families now, and I hope that continues in future years. I'm just curious, how is that being communicated to families in our community who are eligible for scholarships, especially if they're not perhaps seeing Facebook posts from parks or something?
Can I chime in? Is that okay, Colin?
Yeah.
So I spoke with Jessica Black, who actually issues our scholarships, and we talked today about ways to communicate with CAN and the communities, that Avalon Housing, that automatically are eligible for scholarships, and making sure that we're getting that information to them. Also reaching out to people by phone, perhaps, because there are some scholarship folks that don't have access to technology, right? Sending out specific invitations that say, here's what we have for you this summer. Please utilize this resource. Here's what it is. Here's how to do it. Sending it maybe through the mail as well. So really trying to create more of an invitation style welcome for folks, because I also agree with you. I think it's so important because there are a lot of people that just don't know it's available.
Great. Julie.
Thanks. I just had a related question about scholarships. So they're holding 10% of both the camp and pool spots. So that's like the family reservation spots plus no. So just
we're starting with that. We're starting with the camp.
Okay.
That is where the 10% is there. As we look at the reservation system, we're going to see what opportunities there may be to do things, but it's a little bit harder in that situation. To figure out that one, as opposed to when we know we have a camp of 50 people.
Right. Okay. So it's going to be exclusively with camp. And I think that's because there's going to be really high demand in this community for camper spots. And do you limit the number of weeks that kids can come to camp, or is it just open to?
So Cheryl has been successful in kind of wording it so people, encouraging and wording it so people that they don't sign up for multiple weeks. I think with the river camps, because of the specialty of that camp and the fact that it is the same camp week after week, it is easier for us to kind of limit on that side. Traditionally, Fuller Camp and Buhr Camp have been much more driven as a childcare service. So it's much harder for us to limit that because that's a need that's there. So we're going to try to figure it out to see how we can do it. It is one thing that, again, we don't want the same 50 people doing camp all summer long just because they're the fastest ones there and they can pay for it up front. but it's something we want to kind of continue to work on.
Yeah, no, definitely pros and cons because there are needs for people to have consistent
Yep.
options for their kids this summer too.
Yep.
Yeah, and I just also just echo as we are learning things about. I remember seeing some people at in a pool last summer thinking they're going to get COVID, like they're so close to one another, like how is this, and they didn't, right? So I think as we continue to learn, hopefully we can, folks at the county will be able to communicate those best practices. And I just try to remind myself, like, it's a novel virus. We actually don't know, and we're constantly learning. But thank you. Absolutely, really great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think our kind of key takeaway is we're obviously not all the way back to 2020 or to 2019. And it'll be a while, I think, before we get back there, but we want to highlight the fact that really compared to last year, we're able to offer a great deal. I know that there's going to be people that are unhappy because of the times or the availability of certain facilities at certain times. But I think we just really have to work to highlight the things that are improved this year over last, and eventually get back to a place which is perhaps kind of normal in the future. So the staff have worked hard really to put all of this together, and they'll continue to be working hard on it up until the day it starts, and then there's an entirely different kind of hard work ahead of them. But it's a lot of planning, and I think we are in a good place. So thanks to the staff for that.
I think that hard work, for sure, because it was a very, it was a great presentation, and all of you have thought of, you've thought it through every step of the way, and it seems like there's safety precautions at every possible step. So thanks to all of you. Pravina, I see your hand raised, right?
Yeah, so I guess this question maybe is directed to Gail or whoever can answer it. Can someone explain to us a little bit more about how these pods, I saw that pods of 6 people per family versus being people in the lane, how is the logistics going to work? I know last year you guys it changed over time, but how will this next year work with users using the pool during the day for lap swim versus family swim? And the second part of my question is, I'm guessing we're not policing family pods interacting. Cross-pollination. I'm like trying to figure out the word.
So a few things. So the way the family spaces work is that not only are they giving a very specific space on the pool deck, but they are given a very specific space in the pool. And they actually are required to stay in that space. We are required to ask people to social distance from other folks. It is you could tell it's a very uncomfortable situation when people start getting too close to somebody who's not comfortable confronting that. So we make the spaces very clear, and then we have to have a person on deck that actually that is their job the entire day, is to make sure that people are socially distancing from folks that are not in their group. And in terms of how people determine they're a group of 6, really, obviously there's no way for us to know who's in whose family. That's none of our business. If you choose to come with a group of 6, that's your people. You're in the pool space, you're in the deck space, we're good to go. And so that's really how we regulate the space, and that will happen at all 3 pools. So all 3 pools will have a specific deck space for you and a specific space in the pool. So even like our lap lane swimmers, every other session, we start them at a different end of the pool. So at 6 o'clock, you start at one end. The 7:30 group, they actually start on the opposite end. So that way there's no interaction, and we can make sure that transition is very smooth.
Any other questions or comments about pools and camps? Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today and giving that great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Our next presentation is on the parkland acquisition analysis. So I'd like to welcome Remy Long. Hi, Remy.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
How you doing?
We're good.
Hanging in there.
Joining.
Nice to see you all outside of a closed session.
Yes.
We also have Scott Herod here. He's going to chime in whenever you guys have questions that Colin or I can't answer specific to GIS. But yeah, am I able to share my screen, Kristen? I think so. Yeah. I want to start out with a brief presentation to make sure we're all on the same page about our funding, where it comes from, the governance structure, and how it's been used to date before we dive into a more detailed discussion on GIS. Everyone can see my screen? Great. Okay, so the open space and parkland preservation millage passed in 2003, commonly referred to as the Greenbelt millage. It funds parkland purchases within the city limits and regional land preservation efforts surrounding the city, but within the Greenbelt district. So effectively has two arms. The governance structure for the millage, the Parks Advisory Commission serves as the body that screens, evaluates, and makes recommendations on parkland acquisition applications to City Council, and in addition, provides overall recommendations and strategic plans for how that work is done, and sets program priorities. Your counterpart or equivalent on the other arm is the Greenbelt Advisory Commission. So all making recommendations eventually to City Council. So let's talk about the specifics around funding. The millage itself generates about $1.5 million in revenue each year. That's, I'm just going to say it's changed year to year, but that's the last 3-year average. And the millage was bonded up front, so there is debt service to the bond that needs to be paid annually. So that 1.5 million is the revenue that hits the accounts. It does not include the amount that we pay in debt service each year. So just based on that revenue and the remaining years in the 30-year millage, we're looking at approximately 18 million split into the two arms. You can see that PAC's current unrestricted fund balance is around 5.5 million, with 500,000 coming in a year. Future revenue anticipated to be in the ballpark of 6 million. So effectively, PAC will have around 11.5 million until 2033 to utilize for parkland acquisition purposes inside the city. So what have we done with the funds that have been used so far? We've completed 34 acquisitions worth over 13 million, adding 168 acres to the city's park system since 2003. This constitutes both new parkland acquisitions, standalone parks, as well as additions to existing parks, and both nature areas and neighborhood parks with built infrastructure, play structures, et cetera. What has guided all of this has been the PROS plan. We have embedded our strategy and our scoring matrix within the PROS plan. And in recent years, or over the last decade, a lot of that land or that portfolio of acquisitions has happened through conveyance of donated land from development agreements with developers inside the city. So again, the millage passed in 2003, but it was actually around 2010 that PAC established a scoring matrix to help evaluate prospective applicants or acquisitions and prioritize them. So this is an example of one of our scoring frameworks. So when an application is received by the city, staff preliminarily meet and screen that that application, score it, discuss the opportunities, the costs, much of the things that we then present to you in closed session to help inform your deliberations. So this is one of actually two scoring matrices or matrices. There's a natural area matrix and an active park matrix. So for instance, natural area would have been for the Windy Crest acquisition that added to the Ruth Venn nature area, while the current acquisition happening at the St. Joe's parcel would have been scored with the active parks matrix. So that's where we've been and how we've been operating. And there are additional tools that we can use or leverage to help inform our discussions. And one of those is to use GIS. I want to just cover some of the higher level things of what we were talking about when utilizing or leveraging GIS as a tool for parkland acquisition purposes. So what it is GIS driven, which means it's based on the available data that we have. It is going to be select layers or data points that Scott or others the county have access to. It's a reference point for deliberations. It is not the end all be all, and it's a rough sketch of remaining criteria land. So we can use some of the criteria identified in our scoring matrix that does translate well into available GIS data to try and pull out and extract select parcels that represent what may be a rough sketch of remaining lands we'd be interested in. What it is not is a indicator of land quality. It is not our matrix talks about level or percent invasion on a property or the floristic quality index. And those are not going to be criteria or layers available in GIS for us to leverage in an analysis. So it is not a comprehensive analysis. It is going to use what data we have. A map that is generated from that is also not necessarily exclusive. Just because a parcel has been identified or has not been identified doesn't mean it's now a binary yes or no, we will consider an application. It just gives us some basis for having a discussion of whether or not an application that has come in was previously highlighted in the mapping that we've done. And it's not necessarily reflective of the actual opportunity at hand. Again, any real estate is going to take a willing seller. So just because we found some parcels on a map does not mean we have willing sellers and the opportunity is at hand. What it could be is a basis to be leveraged for targeted outreach. If we can pull those mailing addresses, it is possible to send solicitations to those owners to try and increase parkland applications coming in. It could be more comprehensive as well. It doesn't have to be limited in scope to a few variables. It could essentially go on and on. Let's not ruin Scott's day here, but it could go on and on. And the analysis or the use of the tool could end up being useless if the scope is too narrow and if it is too large. We need to find the balance between selecting priorities or identifying priorities within a range that actually means something and is has a tangible benefit for what we're doing. So I'll get into that in a little bit. And one of the unintended consequences, should this end up being a public facing map, is that it could be a driver for speculation, where people see that the city has identified a priority parcel, and you may find people interested in purchasing that and hoping to negotiate and leverage their position with the city for a sweet deal on their end. So there are some dangers in creating these maps that should be understood beforehand. I've highlighted here two items that really we need to flag in terms of staff capacity. This is where one of these analyses is useful, but really results, the end result is more work for the staff. And with our current limitations, I just want to note these two as the major limiting factors in this whole discussion. So It's a tool, has capabilities to leverage existing data and improve our understanding of what's available, and GIS is constantly improving. And so it is appropriate for us to do this exercise. And now, even where we are 10 years ago, this is a useful exercise to do right now. We can always, as I've said, look at opportunities outside of the scope of any GIS mapping that's done. And a great example of this, we've done several over the years. But of course, one example of this is the addition to the Bryant Community Center, where we actually purchased a smaller parcel with a home on it that wouldn't necessarily fit well into our existing matrix criteria. So it's a reference point that we can then add on top of several other criterion variables that can't be accounted for in GIS. So to illustrate this for you, staff have prepared a preliminary mapping exercise to illustrate the utility, and then we can discuss how we got there. So this is a map that Scott pulled together of all of the vacant land in the city of Ann Arbor. So just a straightforward yes or no analysis: is the parcel vacant? This generated or selected 592 parcels in the city. So not necessarily useful for our purposes, because with, as I said earlier, 500 with approximately 11.5 million available for the remainder of the millage, we will not be able to acquire 592 parcels, nor should we. Just want to check in. Is everyone still able to hear me, or is my internet connection spotty?
You're okay.
We're good.
Okay, and then we ran an analysis to select and be more restrictive in the parameters. So we pulled every vacant parcel adjacent to the Huron River, and then vacant parcels greater than 1 acre and adjacent to existing parkland, and then vacant parcels greater than 2 acres in any location. And so the reason for the emphasis on vacant is that that has the most clear opportunity in what we have already established as criteria in our scoring matrix, due to the relative costs of adding structures and liabilities into a given parkland acquisition scenario. So we're just focusing on vacant here, and I understand the limitations to that, as I referred to with the Bryant Community Center, where we wanted to add smaller and structures. So
And just to
this generated.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Remy?
Mm-hmm.
Just to clarify, on the map that's on the screen, all of the green parcels are existing parkland. They're not actually vacant parcels.
Correct. Yeah. What you see is the green is existing parkland, and then the outlines in. I mean, it looks black on my screen. Darker outlines around select parcels are the actual vacant parcels that were pulled out, I believe.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay,
so
I think has a question.
Yes.
Jeff, you want to go ahead?
Well, I got a feeling that this might be next, but clearly when you look at those, if some of us realize that, like, one up the street from me, that is under action already, right? And so I assume ownership is going to be a layer
right.
that's coming up. Okay.
Yep. So 76 parcels actually for us in our exercise still felt a little too broad. So again, given the funds available, staff capacity, and the general workflow that we're working in terms of deals per year, with what we have remaining, it would be logical to narrow it even further to maybe even better opportunities. So we upped it in 2 categories, up 1 acre. So again, any vacant parcel adjacent to the Huron River, because that's a very unique opportunity. vacant parcels greater than 2 acres adjacent to parkland, and then standalone vacant parcels 3 acres or greater. This puts us in the ballpark of 50 parcels. And so, as you mentioned, Councilmember Hayner, some of these opportunities are non-starters. There's, things that are already coming off the map. And so this is just an exercise to illustrate what GIS can do. And then we would need to supplement it, likely with, input from planning to see what's already, in the works, as well as from Dave Borneman and his staff about parcels maybe that are truly unique that the analysis didn't identify, that we can add as a layer on top, saying just by way of interacting with folks in the city, we know these opportunities exist that GIS didn't capture. So Scott translated that last map into an interactive online GIS map that would be available for you all to poke around in, so that you could look at these parcels and see which ones fell under which criteria, or potentially multiple criteria. Some of them meet both marks. And serve as the basis for a discussion for us. And so the discussion involves, what does this map mean to us? What does it offer us? How do we want to leverage it with our existing scoring matrices, and utilize this information when we go into closed session to have our deliberations about specific applications? Okay.
Jeff, did you have another question?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you. That's exactly what I had pictured, thanks for putting this together. I think it's great to be informed this way and get a scope of what we're looking at here, what's left in the city. And then, obviously the one, like the Buhr property, that big 51 acres or whatever up by, and I'm thinking that there are, even in that case where we know it's off the books because we went to the public meeting last week where they're saying their project, but they indicated as part of that project meeting, this is what we want to shelve off and donate to the city. This is how the land's going to be treated. So some part of it is walking trails and maintained open space and so on. And so I get a sense that there may be keys in there for what we're looking at when we get these developments to say, for connectivity or whatever our purposes are, that I think even with parcels that are exempt, there may be ways to create proximities around our parks and say, keep an eye out on this, keep an eye out on this, because this is what we would like them to consider shelving off to us, to make our parks bigger or whatever. So just, I can see proximity playing a big role in how we, search for prized properties, I guess is what I'll say. So anyway, thanks. That's awesome.
Rachel.
Mine is just a practical Patty moment. But I wanted to see how long we want to devote to this discussion. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I have to leave by 6.
I don't think that'll be, the rest of our agenda is pretty quick after this.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, not a problem. Other questions or comments for Remy or for Scott?
Yeah, Scott's here to answer any of the technical questions if you have, what can we do in addition to this or anything like that, if you want to prompt those kinds of nitty-gritty questions.
Mm-hmm. Mike, I saw you came off mute. Did you have a question?
Yeah, and I mentioned this to Scott in an email before, and this may be a graduate master's project in GIS, but one of the things that I feel like we have an opportunity to do in town is identify some of these non-motorized connections, perhaps cut throughs through neighborhoods, or ways that one part of town is put together with another part of town. I've seen this, oddly on private property in McKinley's development that's up along Upper Traver Creek, upstream from the golf course. There are all these ponds and paths that run through this apartment complex that are, a de facto connection if you're on a bicycle and you're going through that part of town. But there are also neighborhood cut-throughs that are all through, cul-de-sacs and other parts of town that, kids know about and maybe neighbors maintain. And, I imagine when they get run down, the city gets complaints about their maintenance. But I'm tossing this out there because I'm wondering if there's a way to put some of these, informal transportation corridors as part of this to be able to see if there are more opportunities out there that we don't know about. For example, this new place where we looked at down on Packard Road, interesting to think about as a park. A lot more interesting to think about a park if it had connection to, Buhr Park or something other than just being a pocket off the road. Like I say, it feels like an awfully big question when I ask it, but I put it out there for all of us to think about moving ahead here.
Well, I can speak to that. If you can identify any of these features or areas, we can put them into the GIS. It's pretty simple. The analysis I did for this was basically using the land use layers that we currently have, plus the city's parcel layer. I just picked out the vacant ones, did the sizes and things like that. So if there are other, anyway, I know we do have layers for non-motorized transportation. We have some of the tree line information in the GIS as well, but any other information you can show me on a map or that you know of that's anywhere, even if it's on a PDF or a graphic somewhere, I can map it and put it into the GIS and show you those.
There's definitely an opportunity here for a wider scope in terms of adding additional layers. I know that the Trust for Public Land has a tool called Park Serve, where you can type in your city anywhere in the United States, and it will provide you with their analysis of what service your park system has to the community in terms of 10-minute walkability. And so their system says that 92% of Ann Arbor residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park, which in terms of the scale of park service across the US, that's on the higher end. We're doing very well. And it also identifies the areas where maybe additional park service is needed. Granted, that analysis doesn't talk about actual safety or access to those parks. It's just kind of as not the crow flies, but as the sidewalk bends, but not crossing, Eisenhower at rush hour to access the park that's in your neighborhood. So there are additional layers that, as you were saying, Mike, this could be a PhD or a master's project from Seas. This could take years, but just as a basis for us to use in our discussions in closed session, for now, I think what we've put forward, it's having a map, which is helpful as a reference point, and then we can talk about partnerships with the university or others moving forward and adding and stacking layers into this analysis as time goes on.
I can see how this works really well for right now, though. So thanks a bunch for putting it together.
Sure. Thanks, Scott.
Jeff, and then Julie.
Thanks for letting me speak again. So I think is Scott still with us? Did I cover him up by mistake?
He's still here.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
My thing flipped around here. Okay, so if I understand it right, I know you said there's all kinds of layers of land use and parcel and non-motorized transportation and so on. I know we have a land value layer and some other things. I'm sure we have zoning layers and all that.
Mhm.
And so it is to follow up with Mike's comments, is it as simple as saying we recognize, simple as saying we recognize, these are connective areas and we can kind of highlight, draw some lines on the map, and then you say parcels within this proximity. It's sort of like that. Like you can say within so many meters of this, a line that runs down the center of Packard or whatever. Is that how it functions? Like if we said, let's look at some connectivity and you can call out things and it keys all the property layers that are associated with that and generates a list. That's sort of the inner overview I had a couple years ago, but.
Yeah, no, we can do that. We can take proximities and do what we call buffers off of any points, lines, or polygons that we put into the GIS. So if it's off if you want to do a 500-foot buffer around a crosswalk, we have crosswalks included in our GIS. If you want to do it from street signs, if you want to do it from parks, from any of those three types of features, we can do proximities or buffers, as we call them, to any extent you want. We can include and exclude people. We can get to the residents and the owners within those. The only areas we may have difficulty is once you trip outside the city limits. Once you get out into the townships, it's a little bit more difficult for us to do notification.
I think it would be super useful, and if we chose to look at it, if you could share what kind of layers we have, and then it might give people who have different ideas for the value of this to the parks conversation, what we might be asking for. Like, I think connectivity is absolutely somewhere on our parks, pedestrian amenities and all these things. They're all part of our parks mission, right? So I think that's just super valuable opportunity.
I'd say,
here. What's that, Colin?
Even more specifically, yeah, I would say even more specifically than just as a part of the mission, they are kind of identified goals in the master plan. I mean, specifically, connectivity is kind of agreed upon as one of the kind of highlights, the most important.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I every once in a while, because of how I'll hear from constituents who say, we want to be part of this park trail, and so I'm wondering if entrances and exits to our parks, I know you can see them on the map, like, are they identified as layers? And then we say, let's pick and choose which ones tie up with private property trails and so on. And is it that fine grained?
It can be. We
Okay.
have all the park signs, all the park trails, parking lots, playgrounds, ice rinks, drinking fountains. We have, I believe now, all the memorials on park structures are now photographed and cataloged in the GIS. So we can add things like the park entrances. We may not have them specifically, but those are pretty easy to add on there, especially since especially the local parks have multiple entry points that really aren't at the end of roads or things like that. It may be where a path comes out and hits a sidewalk. That may be the actual entry point to the park. But yeah, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of the park entrances, that's another thing staff are working on at the moment is as we update the web pages, oftentimes, if you go to Google or if you go to kind of another map service on your phone where they have the pin for the entrance to a park may not be in the correct location at all. So we're actually doing a lot of work to try to correct those so people are being sent to the right places and are happy actually when they arrive. So.
Yeah, we maintain our own Google map for the parks, which has the little red marker for each one of them, and then it links back to the actual park page. And like Colin was saying, their staff are in the process of physically moving those to what they would figure to be a better park entrance than where they stand now. And we're also in the process of probably changing the address of some of the parks to closer fit the entrances where they're currently at now. A lot of the parkland acquisition, it was just done by whatever the address of the land was at the time. And that may not be the current or best way to address it, especially as you start searching through Google or Bing or other online mapping services.
I've seen a few odd ones out there.
Yes.
There's a couple where it's like, what? Like, how could that be it?
Mm-hmm.
Julie, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, and I don't expect like a response necessarily. Just some of my favorite parkland acquisitions are ones that wouldn't show up on this map, right? Because they're like little things that increased access where we had, I think about like Bluffs, and we had one entrance and now we have 3 entrances because we added or through some development got a free, got a donation, and I know it's not free, but got a donation, and that speak to that connectivity. On Greenbelt, we are going through a whole reworking of our, of these, of how we rank and how we score, I guess scoring matrix, sorry. And, I don't know if that's something that we would want to do as like an internship project or think about, and again, not expecting an answer because I know we've got other things to get to, but I did want to put that out there that we are, going through that process on the other end. I think it's, held up pretty well. If we look at, we talked about connectivity and it's number 1, but probably some things around equity at least that, think about that St. Joe's acquisition that's benefiting the Ann Arbor Housing Commission property that's there, that we may want to think about adding in some sort of measure, at least on that scale.
Colin.
Yeah, I would certainly agree about the equity comment for the St. Joe's acquisition. I think that's something which has been important over the years for acquisitions, including the property kind of adjacent to Bryan Community Center. And I was really only just going to echo kind of Councilmember Grand's comments about the fact that the GIS tool is great and it provides us all sorts of information. It also requires, I think, to identify potential parkland that is important to the park system will always require staff input and citizen input to tell us where there are things that are deficient, where there are paths that kind of exist, but informally. I think that Mike is perhaps speaking about those. Is there a way, if we understand that people are already kind of using land in this way, is there a way to formalize it to make sure that we don't lose it? So all I'm really saying is I think it's a combination of the GIS tools, but also just kind of staff expertise and the community expertise over the years.
I think it's important to acknowledge how much time and effort staff puts into this. I know that there is a cap on how many administrative costs we can have, and there's only so much time that Remy has in a day, and Scott too. So I appreciate everything that you guys have brought to us, and I do think it's an interesting opportunity to consider in the future whether or not this could be some sort of internship or a partnership with someone else to explore some of these areas further. Are there any other comments or questions for Remy and Scott? Okay, and Councilmember Hayner, I just want to make sure that this discussion sort of got at what you had hoped for when you brought up the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think, Colin, you summed it up nicely where it's sort of it can stand up in partnership with the clear expertise that the community and our park staff has, and maybe give us a peek at what's happening and kind of give us some, you never know what's going to pop out when you look at these things. I'm just a big fan of GIS. I want to learn more about it. So I guess, Scott, if it's okay, I'll email you and I'll copy Colin and Mr. Crawford on it. And if you can send me some more info and make it easier offline to show you the kinds of things that I've kind of been interested in. And it just seems like an awesome tool to supplement that expertise. So thank you very much.
No, of course, any of you can email me whenever you want, and I can show you how to use the GIS we have. I can give you an idea what layers we have, what the potential is. No problem.
I think I had somebody put it on my old device and then they switched to a different laptop for us. And so I lost access. So I may have to have IT come back and plop it on here. So.
Okay, well, Remy and Scott, thanks so much for joining us and providing all this good information. And Julie, I know you have to take off in just a minute. So
in like 10.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Mike, I think you had a question, maybe.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Colin. Oh, Mike's just saying goodbye, I think.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. Moving on to reports. First up is Colin for the Parks and Recreation Manager report.
Not a whole lot today. Really, I was going to speak to you about the camps and the pools, but I decided it made more sense to have the people that actually run the camps and the pools speak to you about them. So that's kind of an overview there. We are still open at the ice rinks, Betts and Buhr, and they are heavily used for the time that they're open, and everything seems to be going pretty well, which we're obviously happy about there. Spring is coming. It actually felt a little bit kind of like it today with the sun out and the warmer temperatures. We did last week, we did the annual training session for the volunteer burn for natural area preservation. I'm not quite sure how we did it virtually online, but we had 35 people at the training. So when the snow melts and things warm up and dry out a little bit, we will have a burn season this spring. We were not able to do that a year ago because that was at the stage when the only kind of work that was allowed was essential work. So I think we're pretty eager to get out in the spring this year and do some of the work that we weren't able to get to last year. We are hosting actually walks at parks every Saturday for the foreseeable future as a way just to get people out in the pandemic out of their house, you know, so that they can go for a walk, highlight some trails and spaces and parks and places which in the past perhaps haven't had the promotion that they are through this. So that's been going pretty well. We had, I think the first weekend we did it was when it was incredibly cold and we still had about 29 people come out. We stagger them over the course of the hour, and it's just small groups actually go on the walk together as opposed to a larger group, of course. We are starting to hire for seasonal jobs. Obviously, for the pools and camps, we intend to run those. I actually approved a bunch of the golf course positions for the seasonal position for the summer today. So we're really starting to get into that season, which is exciting. And I know that on, I think it was the February the 8th, maybe, was when City Council heard about the proposed fee increases for Parks and Rec and overall for kind of the budget. Since then, I've only really gotten a couple of questions. So at the work session itself, there weren't any questions asked about it. As they come up, if they come up, I will include all of you on the responses. And that is, I think, everything I have today.
Great, thanks, Colin. Any questions for Colin? Okay. We'll move on to report from the Recreation Advisory Commission. Patty.
Really nothing to report. We are meeting on March 9th, so I will have more to report at our next meeting here on March 16th. Is there anything that anyone would like me to ask? If you want to just shoot me an email or let me know anything, just let me know. But like I said, I'll have much more at our next meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Patty? Patty, I will say, I know that spring sports is on the mind of a lot of parents and whether or not those will happen this year.
Yes, that's actually in my mental list is what's going to happen with that. There have been things outside during the winter. And I honestly don't know. I think they've gone pretty well. I think they've had pretty good attendance, but that is the number one question that I'm reasonably sure it's going to be addressed at our next meeting. So
great. Well, we look forward to your next report then. March. Thanks. Reports from other relevant commissions, committees, boards, and our task forces. Colin, I don't think we have any other reports today, do we?
No.
Okay, great. Moving on to commission proposed business. Budget and Finance Committee Chair nomination. So we did have one PAC member express interest in being the Budget and Finance Committee Chair. So I'd like to nominate Patty Smith as our Budget and Finance Committee Chair. Would anyone like to second Patty's nomination?
I'd be happy to second.
Rachel, great. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of appointing Patty as our Budget and Finance Committee Chair, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Patty, for all you're doing.
Oh, thank you. No, I promise not to run us into the ground.
Yeah, no kidding. It's great to see you jump in right away after being a new member. And it's honestly, it's a great way to learn more about PAC. So we really appreciate you.
Right. That's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, let's just jump in. So cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, congratulations. We don't have a closed session today. We've already covered some LAC business, but no closed session. So moving on to second public comment period. Kristen, do we have anyone on the phone?
No callers.
No callers. Okay. Thanks. Communications are included in your packet, and so we stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.